In another video of mine, I stated how the events between Tem's demise and the first performance of Adler takes place over 6 to 7 days. However, after watching the first episode again for a project I'm working on, I couldn't help but notice Tao and Kai talking in the changing room about how the performance is in 2 weeks.
The performance is in 2 weeks, right?
This caught my attention, as this obviously contradicts my idea of 7 days. Okay, look, I swear to God this was meant to be a quick video. This was meant to be like a quick little 5-minute video of me going, oh, let me just look at the facts and quickly check this thing. I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole. This was meant to be a quick video. I'm sorry. I promise I'll get the blood video out soon. I'll get out as soon as I can. But this, I just couldn't leave unchecked. It was festering in my mind. So I went down the rabbit hole and, well, look at the runtime of the video. So, first and foremost, I will admit right now, I was wrong. I'll admit it. I can admit it when I'm wrong. I was wrong. While we are only shown 7 or 8 days worth of content throughout events throughout the period between Tem's demise and the first performance of Adler, the actual time period is much longer, and depending on whether you look at the anime or the manga, you get a vastly different timeline. And that's where things get complicated. So, let's quickly go through my original timeline as proposed in the previous video. Day 1, the opening of the series. Tem runs away and the beast devours him. Day 2, the news of Tem's death breaks and Legoshi gives Els the love letter. Okay, look, I know it's the same day. I kind of read it wrong here. It's more, the previous night Tem was eaten and then the next morning he was found. It's one of those weird things where like after midnight it's technically morning, but people don't say that. They say, yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, even though they'll see you in like 7 hours. You know the pedantic thing, but yeah, let's just say day 2 for the sake of argument. Day 3, Legoshi goes to Tem's shrine to tell him he delivered the letter, and Louis tells Legoshi to alter Tem's costume to fit Zoe as he stands guard outside the theatre. This is where Legoshi meets Haru. Obviously, you're watching a video on Beastars. You watch the series. Let me tell you about the very obvious thing. Oh my god, I am exposition dumping. Oh my god, I've become what I hate. Day 4, Legoshi doesn't want to get out of bed because he's depressed. Later on that day, he goes to get the flowers, meets Haru, and sits by the windmill. Day 5, Louis accepts the school reward, and someone calls him Lewis. Possibly later that day, or possibly the next day, the newspaper editor yells at the club members, and we're told the performance is the next day.
What? But we need it tomorrow.
What can I do? I'll make it to the second performance.
Day 6. The first performance happens and Louis collapses. As you can see, all the evidence seemed to have suggested it took place in less than a week. First, let's make the argument for the anime. Kai states the performance is 2 weeks away from the day the news broke of Tem's death.
The performance is in 2 weeks, right?
Since we know the performance takes place on the 21st and the 22nd, this means Tem died 2 weeks before the show, or 14 days, which means 21 minus 14 equals 7, or the 7th of May. Tem died on the 7th of May. In the anime, at least. In both the anime and the manga, Sanu comes into the drama department saying, this morning Tem was devoured.
I'm sure you all know by now. Something terrible happened here at school this morning. One of the actors, Tem...
So we know in both the anime and the manga, the club meeting happens the day after Tem's death. Or the day of, like I said, after midnight, it's technically morning, but everyone says tomorrow. The afternoon of Tem. Tem died, and then later that day, the news broke. What about the love letter though? Maybe that took place on another day? Probably not, because in both the manga and the anime, Elle mentions saying mean things about Legoshi earlier that day. And while it's heavily suggested Legoshi visits Tem's shrine the next day, this isn't actually confirmed and it could have actually taken place many days later. But we'll get back to that subject when we talk about the manga. While it's obvious it does, we know the breakfast scene does take place the morning after Legoshi attacked Haru, because he notes how, I can still remember how she felt last night.
I can't eat this. I can still feel the sensation from last night.
Let me just remind you of that. He said last night. Last night meaning the night before. This is important. I'm not just being pedantic. He says last night, the morning of the breakfast. That means the night before was the night he attacked Haru. Okay? Okay. As well as Louis stating about last night, meaning it's the morning after.
As for last night, can you and I call it even now?
which we know takes place the same day Legoshi visits Thames Shrine. And we know that the rehearsal where Louis shows his ankle takes place on the same day as the breakfast scene, as in the previous episode he states, have Zoe's costume ready by tomorrow's rehearsal.
You're the pup in the art department. I've got a task for you to do. Come on, have his costume fitted by tomorrow's rehearsal.
And if they're rehearsing, that means it is the next day, which means the previous day where he visited Thames Shrine is also the day that he attacked Haru, which was yesterday, the night before, which, you know, would actually be kind of impossible for them to have the costume ready by the next day. But if you want to hear more about that, check out my video on the Beastars conspiracy this way, I believe, or just check out the channel. There's lots of good content on the channel. While you're here, why not subscribe? I don't know. If you enjoy this video, yeah, sure, why not? What was my point here? Yes, the costume would be impossible to have made in less than one day. And while Louis is rehearsing on stage, Legoshi and the costume crew are making the costumes outside, where Dom sends Legoshi to the gardening club, which is where he meets Haru. With the next scene we see being Louis accepting the award and the newspaper chief mentioning how the show is tomorrow.
The drama club performance is 2 nights only, which means you get me that close-up at the first performance tomorrow. You got it?
Meaning this takes place on the 20th of May, which means the assembly either happened earlier that day or prior to the 19th. As well as Legoshi mentioning tomorrow's lighting when he talks to Louis.
I wanted to finalize tomorrow's lighting.
Oh, you're in charge of that.
At yesterday's rehearsal, I focused the spotlight tighter in the last scene for a more dramatic effect.
Yeah, I noticed.
So, let's quickly go through the timeline of the anime. The early hours of May 7th, Tem is devoured. The afternoon of May 7th, Tem's news is broken to the drama department. The night of May 7th, Legoshi gives Els the love letter. Most likely the day of May 8th, however this isn't confirmed, so we'll say possibly the May 8th or sometime afterwards. Legoshi, not Tem. Tem doesn't visit his own shrine, he might be a ghost goat. But Legoshi visits Tem's shrine. The afternoon of possibly and most likely May 8th. Legoshi is told to alter Zoe's costume by Louis. The night of most likely May 8th. Legoshi attacks Haru and Louis injures his ankle. The next day, most likely May 9th, Legoshi doesn't want to eat the bread because it reminds him of the texture of last night. This is important. The afternoon of May 9th. Legoshi and Kiba sent to the gardening club to get the flowers. May 20th, Louis accepts the reward from the principal. And May 21st, the first performance happens. While it's very highly suggested and pretty clearly supposed to be interpreted this way, it is not confirmed that Legoshi did visit Tem's shrine the day after he gave Els the letter. However, for the sake of arguments, let's just say that he did. This means there is an 11-day window between Legoshi visiting Haru in the gardening club and Louis accepting the award. Now, let's look at the timeline for the manga. This is where things get interesting. Much like the anime, the first few days play out the same. Tem gets devoured and the next day / that afternoon, Sanu comes to the drama department to inform the club that Tem was devoured this morning. And Legoshi gives Els Tem's letter that night. And it's also stated that on the morning of Tem's death, the performance is in 2 weeks. Okay, so we know from Tem's death, the performance is 14 days away. 14 days away from Tem's death is the performance. Okay, cool. We also know that it takes place on a Wednesday. Okay, cool. That is also important information. But the next day is when it gets interesting. In the anime, Legoshi gives Els the love letter, and it's highly inferred that he visits Tem's shrine the next morning. However, in the manga, it's 1 week later. Sort of. See, the scene of Legoshi visiting Tem's shrine doesn't exist in the manga. It's an anime-only adaptation. Instead, the scene focuses on Mark, Tem's neighbour, who mentioned the performance is on the 26th. Huh. So, in the anime, the performance happens on the 21st and the 22nd of May, but then the manga happens on the 26th. Kind of an odd change to make, but let's just roll with it, yeah? Either way, we know that Mark visits Tem's shrine 1 week after his death, because he said it. Since we know the performance is scheduled for 2 weeks after the day Tem died, this means the performance is 1 week away, making the day Mark visited Tem's shrine the 19th of May. And that means Tem died on the 12th of May, and also makes the 26th, the day of the performance, a Wednesday. It also seems to imply that this scene takes place the next morning, considering in the previous panel, Jack was in his uniform, whereas the boys are in their pajamas now, and Migano is saying morning. So that's an extra day, taking us up to May 20th, and the performance is 6 days away. A few panels later, Kai is shown reading the script for Adler, and 2 students comment on how he's been reading that script for 3 days. This could mean Kai's been reading it for 3 days after the scene with them in their pajamas, or it could just mean that that's the same day and Kai was reading it for 3 days before. There's no way to actually confirm this, except from, getting direct contact from Paru, but I don't think she's gonna reply to any more of my fan messages. So for the sake of argument, let's just say it's the same day as the pajama scene. And it's revealed that Zoe was selected to replace Tem in the performance the day before, which means Tem's replacement was selected on the 19th of May, 7 days after his death. And contrast to Kai talking about this in the changing room, Mokichi states that the show is 2 weeks away from now, meaning this panel takes place on the 12th, meaning Tem was devoured around the 4th. Wait, that doesn't add up. If the show is 2 weeks away from today, then how was it 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago? Something doesn't add up. Okay, in all honesty, there is no clear answer for this, except from actually getting a message from Paru and getting a response. There is no way of actually finding this out. The only answer I can actually come to is it was just a misprint, and they meant to say 3 weeks from now. This means Tem was devoured on the 4th, Mark visited his shrine on the 11th, and Jack and Legoshi chatted the day afterwards on the 12th, which would perfectly line up with making the performance 2 weeks away. Louis states that night they'll sneak into the theatre to rehearse, which is when Legoshi meets Haru and Louis injures his ankle, 14 days before the performance. Unlike the anime, while it is not stated, it is very heavily inferred that the breakfast takes place the next morning on the 13th, with the rehearsal happening an unclear amount of time later. Most likely it's that same day, but it also possibly could be the next, or possibly a few days after the breakfast scene. Regardless, later that day, Legoshi goes to the garden club and comments on the smell of the flowers from that night. Okay, so this is where my big gripe comes in with this. In every version, in the manga, in the sub, in the
It's
dub,
the girl from that night.
every single version specifically says that night. Not last night, but that night. The reason this bothers me so much is all the evidence seems to suggest that this takes place on the same day as the breakfast scene, which took place the morning after the attack. So saying that night suggests that it was a much earlier date, as opposed to saying last night, which was last night. This just seems like a weird translation thing maybe, but the fact that he said that night, and in every iteration, in the anime, in the manga, and the sub and the dub, they say that night, not last night, really throws a spanner in my works. I don't really have a strong argument for this one. The only answer I can give is Legoshi was actually referring to last night. He just said that night for some strange reason. Like, hey, remember that night where we hung out? You mean last night? Yeah, that night. That's the only answer I really have. Or it could have taken place a few days later. There's no clear way of actually knowing. It's just, you can't get a definitive date. Anyway, moving on. There's a clipboard in the gardening club monitoring the health of all the plants, and it says today's date is the 4th of May. Just wait, give me a moment, because let's see, if today is the 4th of May, and we know the performance is on the 26th, that means there is a 22-day window, which is 3 weeks and 1 day. However, the animals are adamant that the performance is 2 weeks away, and they've been saying that from before this date. Something ain't right here. If today's date is in fact the 4th of May, this means when Mokichi said 2 weeks away, he said it at the very latest on the 3rd of May, which is 23 days away from the performance, possibly more. And we know that Tem died 1 week before Mark visited Tem's shrine, provided this does take place on the next day. This means Mark visited Tem's shrine on the 2nd of May, at the very latest, and Tem was devoured on the 25th of April, meaning when the student originally said 2 weeks away, it was actually an entire month before the performance. And the next date we get to see in the manga is the date of Adler, which we all know takes place on the 21st. Wait, hold on. Didn't Mark say to Jack that it took place on the 26th, and Jack confirmed it? Okay, let's talk about the possibilities here, shall we? Possibility 1. Both Mark and Jack messed up and both had the wrong date. Possibility number 2. The school moved the performance up by 5 days to bolster the students and remind them that yes, carnivores and herbivores can live in peace together. And that's actually quite a strong argument, but it still feels like a weird thing to do when they can just wait like another week or even push it up even closer, need be, but it is a possibility. Possibility number 3. It's a translation error. Seems kind of a weird thing to get wrong, considering like numbers are just numbers. It's not like words you can misspell or mispronounce or misinterpret. Numbers are very clearly numbers. I doubt Japanese people are using Roman numerals in their things, or I don't know. It's not a very solid argument, but hey, it's a possibility. Possibility number 4. Haru just changed it for reasons and we're supposed to just go over and it kind of retcons it. Or possibility number 5. Jack and Mark are talking about a completely different performance that never comes back up in the show ever again and is never talked about again, and just so we happen to talk about a different performance even though they're in the drama department. This one's quite loose, but once again, it's a possibility. While this is a massively annoying continuity issue, overall it doesn't change much. Whether the show takes place on the 21st or the 26th, Legoshi still visited the garden club on the 4th of May. Tem was devoured on the 25th of May, and the animals believe 2 weeks is applicable to any period of time. Either way, the next definitive date we get is at the school assembly, which takes place 2 days before the first performance. Meaning there was a window of time between May 4th and May 19th we never get to see. Now, let's talk about what this means, shall we? The early hours of Wednesday the 25th of April, Tem is devoured. The day of Wednesday the 25th of April, the meeting is held in the drama department. The night of Wednesday the 25th of April, Legoshi gives Els the love letter. Wednesday the 2nd of May, 1 week after Tem's death, Mark visited Tem's shrine. Thursday the 3rd of May, Jack and Legoshi chat in the dorm room and Zoe is selected as Tem's understudy. The night of Thursday the 3rd of May, Legoshi attacks Haru and Louis injures his ankle. Friday the 4th of May, Louis saves Legoshi in the breakfast hall and Legoshi visits the garden club meeting Haru. Sometime between the 4th and the 19th of May, the performance is pushed up to the 21st of May. Saturday the 19th of May, the assembly is held, and Monday the 21st of May, the first show happens. This also means that Louis was walking around with an injured ankle for 19 days. Kind of also brings into question why he was so adamant to get the rehearsal done. Sure, the manga says, I don't want you to make me look bad in tomorrow's rehearsal, but if you have like nearly 3 weeks time to rehearse, you have time to learn the lines. He was very certain he wanted to be perfect in the next performance, but he could have just, waited a few days. And sure, it wouldn't have been perfect the next day, but it kind of doesn't make sense if you had nearly 3 weeks worth of time to rehearse. However, this does actually mean they had enough time to make the alterations to Tem's costume to make it fit Zoe. But it also means that even in the manga, my theory about Bill being a foot soldier in a big conspiracy to dethrone Louis is still accurate, and it's still going to be possible to do in time, and my theory still stands. Check out that video if you haven't already, and hey, let's do a subscriber check-in. As I'm making this video, we have this many subscribers on this channel. See you in the next video, enjoy the bloopers, and I'll see you later. Bye!